It may be a mad world out there, but don't worry. We all go a little mad sometimes. That's right, I went there. Welcome to A World of Books with your host, author Anthony Avina. What's up, Bookooligans? How's it going, guys? It is still the spooky season here on A World of Books with your host, author Anthony Avina, and welcome to episode 3. Hope everyone had a good week this week. I'm very excited about this week's episode because obviously we're going to talk about some book news and some interesting tips that I found for authors out there who are looking to find different ways of selling their product here on the internet in this day and age. But I'm really excited because we're going to start a brand new segment, I guess you could call, to the podcast. I actually was recently in contact with a couple of authors who have some flash fiction and short stories that they wanted me to read for them. And this week we're going to do the first one. So I'll talk more about that towards the end of the podcast, but look forward to that. Let's get started with this week's episode, shall we? I thought, what better way to start than with an examination on the recent book trends as far as selling books goes. Now, I think most of you around the world know already that COVID-19, the pandemic, has hit almost every industry imaginable and affected it in very different ways, from performers on Broadway to those working long hours in restaurants closing down, grocery stores, manual labor of any kind, really. Even, work in food manufacturing facilities has been affected. Everything's been either shut down or hours have been cut, or the demand for products has gotten so high that there have been shortages. And the book industry is no different. I'm here reading an article from Vox.com. I'll try and include the links that from the articles that I mentioned here in the description of my podcast, so you guys can go read the articles for yourself. But this article just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's all about the Great Book Shortage of 2021 explained. Pretty much the demand for books is way up this year, especially now that we're going into the second year of this self-enforced quarantine due to the pandemic. Our world has seen us having to force ourselves to find different ways of entertaining ourselves or getting our minds off of this, pandemic. And book sales have skyrocketed as a result. If there's a particular book you've got your eye on, the article says, for the holidays, it's best to order it now because there are problems with the supply chain and it's going to be coming fast for books. So, Executive Director of the Book Manufacturers Institute, Matt Baer, said, think of the inputs that go into a book. There's paper, there's ink, and there's getting the book from point A to point B. All these things are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So obviously the pandemic has been exacerbating existing problems in the global supply chain for nearly 2 years now. We're going 2 years into this pandemic, and everything from the delivery of the products to the manufacturing of the products has been affected greatly on a global scale. Especially the labor aspect of this. There's a shortage of labor, and as a result, a shortage of product. There's a paper shortage, the consolidation of the American printing industry, and an increased demand for books from bored stay-at-homers across the U.S. And you're faced with what Bayer says is a perfect storm of factors to create what some of our observers are calling a book shortage. Now, don't get your hopes up yet, because it doesn't mean holiday book shoppers will be faced with empty shelves at their local bookstore come December. At least this is according to Barnes & Noble CEO James Daunt. There's no book shortage as such at the moment because the nature of the publishing cycle is that these books are planned many months ahead. So most of this fall's major releases have already printed or have their printing runs scheduled, and any delays to those scheduled print runs are expected to be minimal. However, there are some titles, still some titles have seen their publication dates bumped by weeks or even months. Of those, some now won't reach shelves until next year. So that's a huge problem for a lot of authors right now, is that anyone working with big publishers are seeing a lot of their dates pushed back because of the shortage that people are experiencing with the production of the books. So, I'm not going to get into all the details of this article. If you want to read the article for yourself, I highly recommend it. I'll leave the article in the description of this podcast. But I think the importance here is to focus not only on how physical books have skyrocketed in sales, but to focus on what maybe we need to do not only for ourselves, but for the planet as well. Because, me personally, I love a good book. I love holding a book. I love, the feel of a crisp, brand new book or of an aged, well-worn book. As you hold it and you're reading, and it's a very comforting feeling, but it's also affecting a lot of our resources, our natural resources here on the planet. And so I think that's what's really great about the modern age that we live in, is the ability to still read and publish books in a digital landscape. I think that kind of traction with the publishing industry is what's really going to help. For instance, I love seeing my books in print. I loved seeing Identity, my last book release. I like seeing it in my hand. I liked holding it. I love seeing the cover and the matte feeling when I held it in my hands. But I also love seeing it on digital. I love being able to just pull it up in my app and see it there, and everyone's response to it was just so great. I think that digital is really the way to go moving forward. As we see these rises and falls of book shortages as far as materials go. Hopefully technology will advance even further to allow physical copies to be made without sacrificing the natural resources our planet has to offer. But until we get to that point, digital sales, I think, are something we might see an increase of as the demand for physical books increases to the point where supplies continue to plummet as they are right now. Digital is the way to go. Highly recommend it. I have 2 books on sale myself right now in a digital landscape on Smashwords. Identity and I Was an Evil Teenager are on sale for 50% off right now on Smashwords. So that's really where it is. It's digital. And I think it'll not only help our planet, but allow us to still be able to enjoy reading during these times when we're kind of cooped up and holed up in our homes, so to speak. So, again, I'll leave this article down below. You can read how this shortage is affecting us, why so many more people are reading books than they are. But I think another thing that can be taken from this, because there's a lot of negative, obviously, and a lot of worry that goes with this pandemic, and understandably so. And I hope everyone out there is being safe and is vaccinated if you can be vaccinated, and it's just being protected and wearing their masks at all times. Hopefully this pandemic will go away on its own in the future if enough people get vaccinated. But I think that along with those negatives can come positives as well, not in the terms of the pandemic, but in the book shortage aspect. I think the sign that a book shortage is even being talked about right now is a good sign that reading is making a comeback. So many younger generations for years have seen a decline in the desire to pick up a book and read. And even though there's still been plenty of readers out there, I mean, if you are listening to this podcast, you're evidence of that. It is nice to see that, people all around the world are looking for outlets to, express their creativity if you're a writer, or to get lost in someone else's creativity and to find an escape through reading. And it's so great to see that people are finding the joy and the freedom that reading can allow someone. Once again, in these dark and trying times when you see nothing but just, heartbreaking news, it is nice to know that little bright moments of light like this can still exist. And for all of us bookworms out there, this is really heartening to see unfold. All right, everyone, now on to part 2 of our podcast this week. So now we're going to talk about kind of like a sequel, I guess, to the first part of this podcast. We're going to discuss a new way that I discovered of selling books, which I thought was really interesting. This article that I'm going to be sharing is from bookriot.com, a favorite of mine. And it is an article from late July of this year that I thought was so fascinating. And actually, I'm in the business of actually incorporating this into my own writing, in my own, I guess, writing business, so to speak. I'm talking about Etsy. Now, anyone who doesn't know, Etsy is an online website where people can basically create and sell their own unique products in their own stores. Whether it's artwork or handmade, craft items or, anything like that. Anything handmade or unique you want to sell, you can make on Etsy. So I thought, I wonder if authors are utilizing this store to their own advantage. And I thought, let's do some research. And I found this article, How to Sell Books on Etsy. So described in the article, it says Etsy is a veritable bazaar of all things handmade, cozy, and unique. That's why it's the perfect place to sell your own books and bookish goods. Whether you want to start your own small business or make a little extra income on the side, there are some tips on how to sell books on Etsy and bookish goods. Now, I'm not going to read this whole article. I'll leave this link in the description box so you guys can check it out for yourselves. But I like the concept here of becoming your own publisher and your own bookstore in a sense, thanks to Etsy. It gives you a little more control over price and how you're selling things. You can sell things digitally on here too, which is really something I thought was interesting because, you see some Etsy shops that have, handmade physical books, and that's so great to see, but not everyone can afford to do that, sadly. So there are options to where you can, share digital files as your product, which is great to see. I see people selling, iPhone backgrounds and digital artwork, and I thought, the same can be said about books too. So you can technically sell ebooks, digital books, and with the book shortage being what it is already, what better time to start opening your own Etsy shop and selling your own digital books than right now? So the article goes on to talk about different ways of, making your business a success on Etsy. So the easiest thing to do is familiarize yourself with the tool. So things like handling money to renewing listings and selling ads. Etsy has developed over the years to be hugely supportive to its sellers, which is a good thing. I think that's important for the website that is hosting each shop to have a good rapport and help out each store to be as successful as possible. So fill out as much of your profile as you can, and it's very painless. It says you're going to really start out on a strong foot. So the same goes absolutely for filling out product details. So every additional bit of information you can make or add to your product listing will make it easier to find a buyer and help Etsy's search feature. Even if you've included every possible bit of information in the type of product description, fill out the relevant details in the rest of the product editor too. So then there's strategic tools. So they tell you to price adequately. So you calculate the time it took to create the item you're selling, the value of the materials you'll need to create it, research the price of comparable items on Etsy. Then you focus on marketing. So you ask yourself, who are you? What's your shop about? Then you say, you you consider your presentation. You want your pictures, your shop imagery to all be pretty crisp and clean, but also really showcase what it is you're selling on your store. So I thought the concept of an Etsy shop was really interesting, especially because you can do digital. I've also seen authors selling, homemade bookmarks. I've seen homemade products like, mugs or, easy stuff like that. I've seen it all being sold on Etsy, and I thought this was such a good concept, a good idea. In this day and age, it's so hard with the market being what it is, both, as we talked about earlier, the physical book, whatchamacallit? Losing my train of thought here, guys. Don't you hate when you're doing that? The book shortage. With the book shortage being what it is physically, and then the need for digital products with that kind of shortage, the market is seeing a lot of difficulties for freelance writers and authors out there just trying to make a name for themselves, trying to get their story read or seen. And I think Etsy is a great platform to allow you to really put that out there, to really put your own spin on things. Like I said, you can add physical stuff like bookmarks and stuff, but being able to have a digital platform that you control, that you can sell your product on, is so important and is so important in this day and age, and highly recommend it. So if you haven't yet, please make sure you go and check out Etsy and look for more information on my social media pages as I get ready to launch my own shop, hopefully within the next couple months. So check that out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a brand new segment we are temporarily calling The Author's Corner Spooky Edition. That's right, everyone. We have a brand new segment we are starting. Again, the title of the segment is very temporary. I don't know what it's officially going to be called later on, but I wanted to introduce this segment, especially because it is a spooky season. We're reading and talking about a lot of horror themes here, and I thought I would have the honor of starting out this brand new segment with a fantastic new short story. Now, I was in contact with an author named Jose Torres Jr. about a week and a half ago, and we've been going back and forth. We met on Facebook in a podcast group, and he was looking for somewhere to shop his new short story. He's fairly new as a writer, and I thought, my podcast is brand new. I'm looking to make some great connections, and I think that being able to help and share new authors' work like this is just a great thing, and it gives authors a chance to share their work, and it gives you, the listeners, a chance to discover a new writer as they're beginning. So I will leave a link to Jose's Facebook page that he is just starting down below. If you guys could go give his page a like, that would really be great. He's starting a page for other creators to be able to share their work, and that's just so cool to see. So please go like his page. And now, here is Jose Torres Jr.'s short story that he calls Hartwell's Farm and Pumpkin Patch. Stephen and Neil had been driving the car for nearly 90 minutes. The two friends smiled as they saw their destination just up ahead. Happily, they pulled up to the Hartwell's Farm and Pumpkin Patch. The decision between a full-contact haunted house or a haunted corn maze was made easy when they heard of the place. During the day, the Hartwell Farm and Pumpkin Patch is a picturesque farm. It's filled with families on hayrides riding towards a giant field of pumpkins. There are kids running around everywhere, enjoying the farm's many activities, ranging from riding on giant tube slides, climbing hay bale pyramids, playing cornhole, getting their face painted, to nearly everyone stuffing their face with fresh maple donuts and sipping warm cider. To say that the ambiance changes by night would be an understatement. In the light of day, the pleasant family farm is full of laughs, smiles, and families pushing wheelbarrows up from the beautiful patch to the farm store for purchase. By nightfall, the farms morph into a dark place fit for a horror movie. After 7 p.m., the Hartwell's farm and pumpkin patch is host to Fright Farm, the state's only full-contact haunted corn maze. The solid reviews, coupled with it combining the two exact events the friends wanted to do, made the 1.5 hour drive tolerable. They parked the car in the lot, made sure they had their pre-printed tickets, and exited the vehicle. "This is going to be the scariest Halloween ever," Steven said excitedly. "I hope so. Otherwise, why would we have driven all the way out here?" Neil replied. The farm was fully decorated with all the props you would expect at a haunted house attraction. The costumes of the staff were professional grade. On their way toward the path, they saw actors dressed as Michael Myers, Pennywise, and many others. "Hey, look, the guy from that movie, House of 1,000 Corpses, is helping direct the crowd," Neil said while pointing at the man. "You're talking about Captain Spaulding. Let's go towards the maze," answered Stephen. The two friends followed a path created by pumpkins lining the right and left side of it. It was a busy night at the farm, being that this is the last Saturday before Halloween. The place is crawling with the groups of older teens, couples, and even some groups of people that appear to be in their 30s or 40s. It seems like getting scared is attractive to a large age demographic. The line isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be for as busy as this place is. "Do you remember how long we waited to get into that haunted house last year?" Neil asked his friend. "Yes, but that was basically in the middle of the city, and that place was way more cramped than a giant maze on the farm. I bet they let quite a few people go in at once here. They sent us into that place in very small groups," Stephen said. They could see how tall the corn stalks were from where they sit in the line. The aerial drone views on Facebook showed how complex the maze was, but it didn't do justice to how tall these stalks of corn are. "Hey, we can get lost in a maze of maize," Neil joked. Stephen laughed and said, "You are lucky no one heard that joke, or you might really get killed." The time for the next group of people to enter was almost here. Right before the entrance, there was a man dressed as a shirtless medieval hooded executioner blocking the entryway. Beside him, standing atop of a bale of hay, was another one of the farm staff ready to review the rules with the next batch of visitors. This one was decked out as a sexy Lizzie Borden, with her blood-splattered short dress and an axe in hand. Sexy Lizzie Borden began to speak. "Welcome to Fright Farm. We hope you have a good time, but before Brutus here lets you guys in, we have to go over a few rules. First, along with your pre-purchase ticket, you should have filled out a waiver online. If you did not do so already, that's okay. We have printed out some for you. But it does mean you will have to wait to enter with the next group. You didn't read all the instructions, so now you must wait a little longer. Remember, this is a full contact scare attraction. Our actors are all professionally trained. They can and will touch you, but under no circumstances may you ever touch them back. Other than staff, no one is allowed to use flashlights, laser lights, or any other forms of illumination, including cell phones, within the maze. This is a corn maze, and some of the corn is dried, so obviously there's no smoking of any type. Oh yeah, no fucking refunds. Have fun, get scared, and make sure you don't shit yourself. As you walk in, hand Brutus or myself your printed ticket and waiver. If you still need to fill out a waiver, step aside. We will help you out after we get those that read the instructions online in the maze first. Well, it's a good thing we filled our waivers out at home. I'm dying to get inside already. I'd hate to wait any longer, Neil told Stephen. And it's a good thing we did, although I don't know if I'm mind spending a little more time with Miss Borden over there, if you know what I mean. Stephen answered his friend. Yeah, until Brutus chops your head off, Neil told him with a smile. The two handed their papers over to the hulking executioner and entered the maze. Immediately, a deranged clown jumped out from behind the cornice, grabbed Stephen, then let out a high-pitched yell. It gave them both a little scare. Nice way to start, Neil said aloud. They were able to hear screams, spooky sounds, and what sounded like a chainsaw in the distance. The entire maze was illuminated with dim LED light torches. Without those lights, it wouldn't be much of an attraction because nothing would be visible. Especially on a night like tonight, when the moon is hidden behind the clouds. As they walked through the maze, they passed by many stage bodies with their entrails leaking out of them. There was a person strapped to a table begging for his life when his legs were being sawed off by a crazed woodworker, followed by several more jump grabs. This is pretty cool, Neil said to Stephen. Yeah, I bet it gets scarier as we get deeper into the maze, answered Stephen. Out from behind the cornstalks walked a girl in all-white dress, with long black hair covering her face. She just stood there in the middle of the corn row, staring at them. You know, even though I know this is a part of the attraction, that's freaky as hell, Neil told Stephen. Just then, two men with burlap sacks, a sack mask, grabbed them from behind and screamed. And both Stephen and Neil let out shrieks that caused the actor in the white dress to momentarily break character and laugh at them. I almost broke Lizzie Borden's no shitting yourself rule, Neil told his friend as they walked further into the maze. Before they were able to see what the next scare had in store for them, the lights went out. Is this part of the experience? Neil asked. Suddenly, the screams of the patrons changed. Gleeful shrieks followed by laughs transformed into cries of terror. Stephen? Stephen? What's going on? Neil asked frantically. His question remained unanswered as the LED torch lights came back on. The scene was drastically different than it was just moments ago. Few patrons were yelling out for missing partners or group members. A woman just ahead of him was laying over a body with a gash across the throat so large it's a miracle the head wasn't severed. Stephen! Stephen! Neil called out as loud as he could. But Stephen was nowhere to be found. Neil's body was momentarily paralyzed. He had passed the stage of being scared. He was overcome with dread. Neil started to run. Finding the parking lot and getting help was his only path to surviving this ordeal. People were running past him in all directions, screaming. They must all be looking for a way out, and none of them have found one. If they didn't find a way out, then why would I? Neil thought. The sound of a chainsaw started up again. This time Neil knew the show was over, and it stopped him dead in his tracks. Just in front of him, there was a man dressed as Leatherface, wielding the chainsaw through the air as if it were a sword. Was it him that was responsible for this? Neil about-faced, with the intent of running in the other direction. However, he tripped over one of the many dead body props in the maze that was littered with. On second glance, he realized this was no prop. A scream of agony made Neil look back as he picked himself off the ground. The chainsaw laid on the floor and the man dressed as Leatherface was hoisted in the air, impaled by a pitchfork. Holding the pitchfork was a person wearing a hollowed-out pumpkin head as a mask. The jack-o'-lantern-headed beast dropped the body and continued to stab the already motionless man with the pitchfork. The sound of wet meat being plunged into by a large farm tool was audible even over all the screams of the people trying to escape in the background. Sprinting through the maze at this point, Neil was brought to a halt by what he saw in front of him. A person with a hollowed-out pumpkin mask was leaning over a body on the ground, hacking it up with a machete. Blood, skin, and pieces of body parts filled the air. Not knowing what other option he had, Neil ran straight through the corn. It was difficult working his way through the tall, thick corn stalks, but Neil figured if he headed in one direction long enough, he would eventually make his way out of the maze. He also thought that there was no way the killer could have gotten in front of him. That means there's at least 2 killers, but who knows how many more. He also realized that the chances of Steven or any of the other people that are missing being alive were slim to none. The idea worked. Finally, Neil broke through the corn and found himself in the parking lot. He looked around. Mayhem was everywhere. People running out of the maze in fear. Cars were speeding away. A fire was burning near the farm entrance, and more pumpkin-headed people chasing down their screaming victims. How could this happen, Neil thought. How was any of this real? It was at that point when Neil realized that he had Steven hold the keys to the car. With no way out, this is where he would meet his end. "Get in!" yelled Steven from a car that nearly hit him. "You made it," answered Neil in a voice, much weaker than he intended it to be. Neil jumped into the passenger seat and they sped away, leaving the farm behind them. "Steven, you're bleeding. Look at your shirt," Neil told him. "Don't worry, it's not mine," Steven replied. Neil could see the light-up sign welcoming visitors to the Fright Farm in the rearview mirror. Just then, he noticed something else in the rearview. A hollowed-out pumpkin mask sitting in the back seat. Neil looked at Steven with terror in his eyes. No words would come to his mouth. "I told you, this is going to be the scariest Halloween ever," Steven said cheerfully. Well, there you have it, guys. That was my reading of Hartwell's Farm and Pumpkin Patch by Jose Torres Jr. Hope you enjoyed that short story. And perfect, I think, for the spooky season. It was a great twist at the end. For a first-time writer, he did a really great job of pacing and building atmosphere. And I think that twist ending was just a great way to start off the spooky season reading. Don't you think? I really hope you guys appreciated that reading and that you guys will go check out Jose's page that I'm going to be listing in the description below, along with the articles that I spoke of earlier. And I have another reading lined up for next week. So stay tuned, because next week is actually going to be a fun week. It's Halloween week, which means that we're going to have 2 episodes go up next week. We're going to have our normally scheduled episode going up on Friday, which is going to be all about horror book reviews just in time for Halloween. And then episode 5 is going to be a special Halloween edition of the podcast, where we talk about the best written projects of the year so far. That's TV shows, film, games, books, podcasts, all that fun stuff. I'm going to talk about what is on the list, why I enjoyed each, and why you guys should go check it out for yourself. So 2 episodes next week, Halloween spectacular event going on here on the podcast. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed that reading, and it was really fun. Please make sure you check out the link in the description below for those articles, for Jose's page, and for all my social media as well. And guys, stay safe, be healthy if you can. If you're able to get the vaccine, please do. Just, be safe and be with your loved ones, and know that I will always be here to listen to you guys. If you guys have any requests, if you're an author looking to have your work read here on the podcast, whether it's an excerpt from a novel, if you have a piece of flash fiction or a short story you want read, feel free to email me at authorantonyavina@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Book gooligans and bookworms out there, everyone stay safe and have a pleasant evening. You've been listening to A World of Books with your host, author Anthony Avina. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you liked it, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts especially, but wherever you can, and share the podcast with anyone you feel would enjoy it. If you have any suggestions for books we should feature on the podcast, or maybe a topic that you'd like to hear me discuss, please feel free to let me know, and make sure you follow me on all my social media pages so you can get the latest info on this amazing new podcast. I hope you guys enjoy and have a great week.